AI has a very difficult time assessing intent. How the hell do you teach a computer that an arm coming out from the fighter to the other fighter is not a strike attempt?
How did you know there's a growth opportunity here in UFC and fighting for this statistical analysis?
You give people something to watch and something to root for.
What is your advice for our listeners in the innovation and AI space to advance their businesses?
The change is coming. You should own the change. You should power the change. You should do all of those things. But AI is...
The UFC has become a household name, exponentially growing its eyeballs revenue, and I bet you were waiting for this one, its technology strategy. Today, I'm joined by Alon Cohen, EVP of Innovation at TKO, home to UFC, WWE, and IMG, to talk about how their AI strategies help keep the fight alive. Alon, welcome to AI in Action.
Thank you for having me.
So the UFC has delivered honestly unbelievable fights for millions of people worldwide. What exactly are you doing at the UFC? What is your role? How does it evolve in this changing atmosphere?
Let's start a long time ago. I'm lucky enough to have been there at the moment when UFC stats were born. So Rami Gnauer, who started a company called FightMetric with me in 2009, creates UFC statistics on paper. And he starts from the beginning and works his way up. So he says, what is it we should even be tracking at MMA, in the MMA space statistically? Like, what matters? And so I'll give you a weird nuance of our stats. You would think if you are tracking striking stats that you are interested in lefts and rights and things like that. We don't have that. And we don't actually track in our official statistics whether it was an arm strike or a leg strike. We do it unofficially. But the reason is that does not impact whether you win a fight. What matters is, do I get struck in the head? Do I get struck in the body? Do I get struck in the legs? And obviously the head has the largest statistical impact on whether the fight's going to be over. And so he makes this decision. If a human's going to track these 65 plus points, which of them do we need to focus on? And can I also include the throw and the land? And he's like, we're going to track the most important pieces. So it goes all the way back to that moment. 2017 rolls around. Ari Emanuel, Endeavor, they buy UFC. Ari says, I want to be able to use the data in my organization. And he learns that, in fact, the data is owned by this little company called FightMetric. And that's how we end up in the fold. And then the next epic is that we hit the pandemic. And right at that moment, we had turned inwards at UFC as a group to say, look, we were at the time covering a bunch of sports. We were covering surfing. We were covering skateboarding. We had started to cover Miss Universe, and we had done BattleBots. And the idea inside was, what if you took all of that energy and you brought it to the company, not knowing exactly what that would mean? And that's where Andrew Schleimer, CFO of TKO now, he said, I want you guys to be, to borrow a term from Disney, the Imagineers. And we have tried to do exactly that. We are obviously focused on the business first and so on and so forth. But the thing we have built is about creating new things, creating new processes, understanding new technologies, and creating systems to bring them into the business to have real business impact, not just for show. And so that's the shape of the thing today.
So you said 65 points. I just want to go back. What do you mean by 65 points?
We track over 65 data points per fighter per round officially. And then there are some additional unofficial live data points. And then there's a whole data layer built on top of that does things that allow everybody's applications to work. So when a fight starts, we have a thing that says fight start, and a thing when the round starts says round start. And that allows people to do things like close betting markets and so on and so forth. So we built that infrastructure and have matured it over time.
Personal question. When did you become a fan, or are you, well, I'm assuming you're a fan of MMA, but when did you become, because you're so obviously you're working with the stats, but when did you become a fan of it?
When I started FightMetric with Rami, he was at it before I was. And initially, all of the work I did was technology work, because there was so much to do in building the database and building the APIs and doing all of that kind of stuff. And it was only, I think, once we started to attend events. And that took a while. Like, we didn't go to a lot of events. We did a lot of our work remotely. And over time, we started to do live scoring and things like that. And you start to spend time around the people who do this. I think that's the moment where I internalized something that Dana White likes to say, and he says, these are the greatest athletes on earth. There are other jokes in boxing and MMA and other places that people say, like, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, or you're a black belt until I hit you, and then you're a brown belt, and I hit you again, you're a purple belt, right? And there's an absolute truth to that. And training for that, I joke, I like to run, and I joke that, like, runners are really fragile, right? Like, if you push a runner while they're running and they fall over, they're probably not getting up. And if they do, it's not going to be pretty, right? And it's because the point is efficiency, and efficiency means that you're not resilient, right? MMA is about resilience. The other thing is it's about self-control. We like to think of fighters as brawlers, as, what's up, bro? Let's just go scrap and this. Okay, you're going to fight in 4 months. From now on, where you go every day, what you eat every day, where you sleep every day, who you talk to, they will all tell you what to do, and you must do what they tell you to do. You live like a monk. And that's the commitment. So knowing that changes your entire perspective on what is happening. And then the feeling that you get with most people, most fighters, the connections that they form with other human beings on whom they are deeply reliant to make them successful. All of those things sort of brought me in. I was like, oh, I did not appreciate, obviously, the level of skill and things like that you get. And then you watch who it is they are and what it is they have to do to accomplish this. It's every high-class athlete in the world has these aspects to them. But when you watch it here, we give octagon tours at the end of an event. I don't walk into the octagon that often. The octagon's a very serious place, right? The second you get in there, the thing you've committed to doing against someone, by the way, who you are both going to hurt and you oftentimes have genuine respect for. It's the only reason you guys are fighting, is you're like, that person is amazing and might be more amazing than me. We're about to find out, right? Like, that's a serious place, and you should spend time there if you it's like, the old rule in firearms, you should never point a gun at anything you don't intend to shoot. It's sort of like that. You should be stepping into the octagon with a purpose and then have the respect for it that it deserves.
How did you know that there's a growth opportunity here in UFC and fighting for this statistical analysis?
This is a Rami thing. He came at this as a sports journalist, or as a journalist, and therefore also a sports journalist, and he is a baseball fan. So when he watches a baseball game and then he reads a write-up of the baseball game, he is used to the following format. There is the lead, and then there is that paragraph that summarizes what you ought to be reading. Then there is that paragraph below that said, by the way, in last night's game, so-and-so hit for 2, this was his ERA, this was, right, slugging percentage, and so on and so forth. And then here is my actual thoughts about the game and what I thought about these first 2 paragraphs, right? The summary and the analysis of the action. And he started to write about MMA, and all you could say is, so-and-so's coming off of 2 losses, and he's a strong striker. And you're like, surely we can say more than that. Like, I watched a lot of things happen on screen. What is the articulation of that? Wouldn't we learn a lot more if you were able to quantify rather than just qualitatively state, so-and-so big, so-and-so small, right? You should be able to say, this is a person who is currently leading in striking in this division and not. And so his intuition as a sports fan was burned in. And when he started to watch this thing that looked complex, but didn't have a language for that complexity, his instinct was to create the language for that complexity, in this case, a detailed statistical model. And we like to talk about striking. Most of those 65 points are actually not in striking. There are a lot of them there. It's a 3-phased game, right? You must be able to strike effectively. You then must be able to, maybe more phases than that really, clinch and wrestle in that space. And then you have to be able to go to the ground and compete in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so our statistics have to quantify all of that. Here is all of your striking. By the way, striking, standing, and striking on the ground, not the same. Here is clinch activity and takedowns and slams and all of the things that happen here. And then here is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, submission attempts, passes, positional work. All of that has to be articulated in the statistics as well.
The data processing, like you said, initially you have someone watching the fight and writing it down. What does data processing look like now?
It's a yes and process. Rami and I have, for over a decade, employed computer vision and other techniques and cast many of them aside because they weren't ready. So we did motion tracking in probably 2014. and maybe 2015. But the motion tracking software available at the time, and for a long time after that, in different iterations with different providers, could not, when two fighters were fighting, it was like, you're red and you're blue. Then they would come together for a clinch. And they were like, you're purple. And they would come apart. And they're like, yeah, I don't know what the hell's going on anymore. Right. And that was the problem we were having with that technology. It turned out that humans with a technology augment were better than the computers. And so literally you had somebody like mousing around. Humans have and will continue to be for the foreseeable future excellent at edge cases. And in a live television, live sport, live environment that so many people encounter, edge cases turn out to be everywhere. And you don't recognize that you're just like subtly correcting. We, for the last 10 years, have used some form of what today we would call AI. And it is only in the last 2 or 3 years that it has become a regular piece of UFC data collection. And it is limited. We are fostering, we are nursing, we are, come on, you can do it to this technology. And right now, for example, it cannot accurately count strikes, but it can directionally count strikes. And then it can tell you all sorts of stuff about the fight. But in striking, when I am striking, I'll give you a couple of the edge cases that we're starting to fix. A lot of strikers will put a hand out just to kind of see how far away you are and to keep you at your distance. Okay, well now, is that a strike attempt? Most people watching it will intuitively say, that is not a strike attempt.
Yeah.
Congratulations. How the hell do you teach a computer that an arm coming out from the fighter to the other fighter is not a strike attempt, right? To a computer, they're like, everything about that strike looks like a strike attempt, except that you know that he did not intend it that way. And you can't just do it based on velocity, because someone will come out with a strike attempt and then it's like a check. We're going to go back to our baseball analogy, to check swinging baseball, and they check it and you're like, well, okay, you can't use a velocity limiter because that's not quite right. Understanding these things is very difficult for an automated system to do. And that is only one aspect. Landing a strike. We've used sensors and gloves. We've used a ton of different techniques. We've had people with mouth guards in their mouths. And if somebody puts an arm up and your strike hits that arm, that's a missed strike because you blocked it. But to a computer and to a sensor and to like all of those sensors look at that and they're like, that's a landed strike.
Yeah.
Now maybe you could teach it away from that. Okay, great. Somebody swings at you, and this is a game of inches is being generous, right? This is a game of less than inches. If you ever watch a professional fight, the most amazing thing is how little somebody moves to get out of your way, because they know where the arm is coming, and they move, and like the air, right, moves in front of their nose. It's that close. Okay, I swing at you. A human can tell that you rolled with that, right? And then we have rules about if you rolled, did that actually land or did it not land? That distinction for a computer is incredibly difficult to make. And the problem is that oftentimes those are the most important strikes, right? That those can be fight ending if you didn't catch it right. Long story short, just in striking, AI has a very difficult time assessing intent. And so much of what a human scorer is doing is understanding quickly and easily intent. And sure, we have our edge cases too, but if you look at the edge cases for a computer and the edge cases for a human, it's more than 10 to 1.
How difficult was it to implement this and to scale this?
How difficult was it to implement and scale which part?
The AI analysis, the stuff that you have underneath the hood.
It was difficult to implement and scale the AI analysis insofar as we went through 3 systems and 6 years. And in the third system, 2 things happened. And I think that a lot of technology innovation happens this way. There's an initial enthusiasm, right? Crypto's going to topple governments. And people both temper their expectations. Well, it's a few things. People temper their expectations with the technology. The technology proves it has nuances that some humans want to exploit that work very nicely that they didn't see originally, right? That happens a lot. And then it gets easier and cheaper to do over time. And for us, we went from like many cameras, complicated system, and we moved eventually to a world where it was much easier to get computer vision software that was super capable and the hardware was super capable and affordable. And the second thing was we could do it with fewer and fewer cameras. So when we started, we hung a system that we lovingly called Skynet. And it required calibration and it was complex. And today, actually, our system works off of the individual ISO cameras. So the cameras that are on the shoulders of the cameramen, those are the cameras that we're using, and we don't need to add another camera to the mix. So it's both of those things together, right?
Did you see anything happen that was unexpected? You knew what you were trying to accomplish, but did anything happen? Like, did you find something that you didn't expect to find with all these new technologies?
When we started working with sensors in gloves, we said we're finally going to find out how hard people hit each other, and that's going to be so impressive. And the answer is we have ways of articulating it. It's not that impressive. So the reason is if you watch NASCAR, those guys are pushing 200 miles an hour, right? By the time they're through the corners. And if you watch Formula One, that guy took 50 Gs into that crash. If you watch baseball, that person can throw 103 miles an hour. Okay. The impressive part of a punch in UFC that knocks you out is not the speed. It's about 20 miles an hour. Now, it got to 20 miles an hour from here to here. That's impressive. So acceleration matters, but people don't understand acceleration. They're like, wow, that was X number of feet per second squared. And you're like, I'm sorry, I don't know what we're talking about anymore. And that's an important piece for us, right? I'm here to communicate. The technology is in the service of communication. 20 miles an hour, not impressive. Rotation percentage and just throwing numbers at people to throw numbers at people, not impressive. And so to me, that was very surprising. We all thought like, wow, that's going to be so amazing to know. We saw it, we knew it, we understood it. And we're like, wow, that's not going to speak to people the way we wanted it to speak to people.
Can you walk us through how the UFC is using watsonx to power UFC Insights?
So UFC Insights engine built with IBM watsonx for us is a unlock for our humans. I have stats producers. The way we show stats on air on a fight night is that we have a stats producer who is watching our commentator screen and seeing not just all of our statistics that we're producing that night, but also some comparative statistics. This is this person's previous best. This is their average. This is the weight class average. But it's quickly overwhelming. Even in the course of a regular fight, which has a continuous clock. You start at 5 minutes, you go to 0, barring a foul. There is no stopping. And there aren't an unending number of opportunities to put stuff in. So if you're going to change the story of the fight, you have to get organized and pick your moments. UFC Insights engine is built to ask all of those questions at the same time while the clock is running, and then score for us the things it is seeing. And when AI is doing its best work, I think for experts, it says, here are 5 options. And you say, well, options 1 and 2, I know. Option 3 is garbage. Options 4 and 5, I didn't think about. And it's those 4 and 5 where the real value is. Because if one of those sets you off in a new direction, we're telling a new story in that fight. And my researcher couldn't possibly run all of those permutations at once. And it's that level of depth below where we are today. So I'll give you examples of how we think about insights that are different than this is a cool stat. I'll give you this is a cool stat. 72.45% of the time when so-and-so lands 6, takedowns, he wins. By the way, if you land 6 takedowns, you should be winning more than that. People would see that and be like, wow, that's a lot of numbers, right? Like, okay, sure. Same stat. Last time in any fight where this person lands 6 takedowns, they've won 9 and lost 1. Watch for that, right? And now people are like, oh, I get it, right? Like if this guy lands 6, he is on path to win. Now the other guy, they're like, well, in a fight where his takedown defense is over 50%, he's 5-0. You're like, oh, cool. Okay, let's watch, right? And see how these two numbers stack up. And you give people something to watch and something to root for. I was picking on the Olympics earlier. I'll pick on them again. The Olympics are a part of our lives where none of us know anything. And we watch and the commentators say things. And pretty soon, half an hour in with a beer on the couch next to your friend, you're like, I don't know, she didn't point her toes. And I thought her feet come. You're like, come on. How much synchronized diving have you ever watched in your life? And the answer is it doesn't matter because we want to pick up our rooting interests from what the commentators are saying. That's what they're doing, right? Is they're offering storyline, offering places, hooks for us to engage. And that's what UFC Insights engine is doing for us. And the IBM watsonx team has done a great job of coming on that journey with us, understanding how we want to articulate these things, and it changes everything. It's how you structure your queries. It's how you structure the architecture of this thing. It's the output systems. All of that is born from that original vision of what of what UFC Insights engine ought to be. Insights are deep, right? They are there to take a deep cut at data. Generally, you can solve a problem by going deep. You can solve a problem by going fast, but you can't do both of them. They're like deep takes processing time, and fast is the opposite of processing time. And UFC Insight Engine in Fight is an attempt to take the corpus of what we understood in doing the pre-fight work and now optimize that to be able to use it mid-fight. And so that's really the trick, is how do you take what is a relatively large AI footprint and optimize it to run? I need it to go, 5 seconds or faster on everything and all the time. And so on the other side, the technology response has to be, okay, well, I can't do everything every 5 seconds, right? That's going to take an enormous amount of compute. How do I take the actions that are coming in? So for example, a new strike is landed. Do I take one action or do I take chunked actions? And by the way, the nuance is you probably want to take strikes as chunks, and you probably want to take takedowns on their own because they happen less frequently. And so you have to understand all those nuances and what do you take and when do you take it? And how do you use that to optimize what you're processing on the other side? What potential, we like to call them pipelines with the IBM team. How do you choose which pipelines you update based on this action? You should only update the ones that are most relevant. And so there is a whole cascading effect. And of course, the point of this is not to make we used to hard code all of that stuff, right? If you did this, you just brute force the problem. There are too many pipelines to brute force it. You have to lean on the AI to have that intuition for itself, make those choices, and start to build those pathways.
So like the stats that they give to the commentators, like is it before it reaches the commentator, are they just getting the stats that you said, like the original stat of like 76.4, or are they getting the new like massaged version of that stat where they say whatever you said before?
So my commentators have a commentator screen in front of them, and it has basic raw stats. Anything else that we want to deliver to that commentator, we have the right side of the commentator screen that can flip over and show you the read. And oftentimes that read is Monster Energy has a promotion. But if we want to articulate a complex idea, the way we are architecting UFC Insights Engine is my stats producer selects the insight. They have a conversation with the producer who is actually in the ear of the commentator. And the insight has background so that my stats producer, if they get a question from the producer, they're like, so why are you telling me this? And he's like, well, it's the best one we've had in 6 months. And the other people who are ranked there are these people. So you have context. The second thing Insights Engine produces is a full natural language read of this statistic that makes sense so that you can put that up for the commentator. So if they're like, I'm a little confused, and they're like, read what it says on the screen. Not before it comes out of your mouth, but like read what it says on the screen. They're like, oh, I get that. And I can say it out loud and I understand where the story is going. And the last version of it is a cut down that is going to go in the graphic, right? I can't do 30 words. I can do 8 words, 6 words. So you have to have that version of it that's clean and ready to go. And the reason that has to all happen this way is my description of it to you took far longer than we have on Fight Night to do it. Stats producer finds it, clock starts ticking. Within 15 seconds, that entire process is gone and the graphic is on screen, or it's dead and we have to go on to something else.
Is there ever like communication, not just between the commentators and insights, but maybe like with the people who are showing the replays where they say like, this is an important thing that happened, like, and it is associated with the insights that you get from UFC Fight Insights?
It's an excellent question. Could the UFC Insights Engine affect the kind of replays that we would want to show in broadcast? I think the short answer is not now. And it's because replays happen too fast. So I articulated to you that I've got about 15 seconds between when my stats producer understands that an insight is relevant and when it needs to end up on broadcast or we lose the window. Replays actually happen faster than that. A replay operator is sitting there with 4 cameras coming in and 2 outputs going out. They're watching all 4 cameras. And when something cool happens, it's, as you described in your question, intuitive. They're like, that's cool. And they punch it in and they save it. And there is a mind meld that happens between them and the producers. And in fact, there's generally a replay producer and then the producer. When the producer sees something on screen and they think it's cool, they don't tell anybody because they don't need to. Replay operator already knows what's cool. And so when they say, remember that takedown at 129, he's like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And they already have it. it's too fast for something like this. Now, could you combine the two things where you could, in a replay, say that's the takedown that takes you over 6 takedowns, and that's the moment to show the insight? Sure. Can we get to that point? Yes. Generally, that'll happen at the end of the round. Now we've all had enough time to be like, you're going to show, we can hear what replays are you going to show. You're going to do this one, this one, and this one. I've got a graphic for that. Can you paint that replay with this graphic? So there, the answer is yes. It just can't happen in that moment while they're saving the replay. That is on the fly, right? You have to sort of make that machine one with your body to do that job.
When you were training this, when you and the IBM team were training this, were you just looking at old footage and just like running it through? Like, how did you train it? It wasn't live. Were you training it live?
Original Insights engine looks at the whole database as it stands static. So it doesn't need to worry about current fight footage. As you are looking at Insights Engine Live, yes, you have to run live data feeds to it so that it can understand these are the kind of actions I'm seeing, these are the frequency of the actions I'm seeing, and these are the different kinds of actions I'm seeing in their different frequencies. One of my teachers when I was young used to say you have to take game shots from game spots at game speeds. Like, doing this in theory is adorable, but the only way you're going to find out if it works is if you can do it against live data. And one of the things, of course, we can do is we can record all of our live data and use it to, as in a simulated environment, to just come back at the engine, and you clear out the engine and you try it again, and you're like, is it capturing the information correctly? How long is it taking to process? Where are we burning cycles and all sorts of things like that?
Did you ever do dry runs like with the commentators and the stats people and like on a film fight, like just to get the process down?
We sat down with commentators about UFC Insights Engine to tell them what was coming and what is possible and so on and so forth. That is the time they have to give something like this. The number of events we do means that they are constantly on the road, constantly prepping for their next fight, and we are only a part of their process. So to turn your question on its head, how do you turn UFC Insights Engine into something easy enough and understandable enough that a commentator doesn't need a real info session, training session, multiple touches? It should be as simple for them to get on board as it is for the audience to get on board, and then you're going to see uptake. Then they're going to welcome that technology into their world. If I sat down with them and I'm like, all right, guys, I'm extending your fight week by one whole day for multiple weeks, they'd be like, come on, this is a lot. But to come and say, here's a new tool, not hard to use, really impactful, trustworthy. That's how you build uptake. And it's because I think in general, the TKO innovation team treats people inside the company as customers and not as folks who we can burden to do more, right? That is it's a big part of what we do because we're interested in people using the things that we're building and going forward. And also, like, why wouldn't you want somebody to make your life easier rather than harder?
Can you tell me some of like the real key challenges that arose during this process?
The dirty secret of UFC Insights Engine's production is that this isn't our first go at this problem. We went at it with a different AI partner for 2 years. They tried basically to brute force this problem, and it couldn't perform. It never got broad enough, didn't look at enough information, and it never went deep enough, right? It couldn't ask enough permutations, couldn't actually and filter out the stuff that wasn't relevant and bring to the fore the things we wanted to see. And it was that we were trying to avoid as we got into this process with the IBM build team.
You mentioned edge cases before. So they're always present, and you said humans are better at recognizing them. But how did you go from 80 to 100 with this application?
I think the trick right now is that we have built a process for UFC Insights Engine that doesn't have to get to 100 to be useful, right? It's beyond minimum viable product. It's viable product, but it doesn't try to do everything. It just does more than any human could possibly want, and that's good enough. So I didn't try to go from 80 to 100. I wanted to get to 80. It takes more than the 20% effort in a case like this. And the edge cases that we're trying to build for are not data edge cases. It's not necessarily I need more data to make the product work better. There are other places where there are edge cases. It's hard for UFC Insights Engine to do the second thing. Finding out what certain statistical talking points are, hard. Finding out which statistical talking points are relevant, harder, right? That's where we've spent a lot of time, where it scores things, it gives them back to you. And it's like, is that the most important thing I can tell you now? And you're like, no, not that, right? And working with the team to figure out those are the edge cases where we're spending the most time, because time is of the essence, because trust is of the essence. The system can give us things that aren't perfect. It just has to give us things that are perfect enough most of the time that you feel like, yep, it's working, right? And those are the kinks that we're working on.
So you keep on you mentioned the recommendation engine for the insights that you're passing off to whoever's going to read them. How did you come up with that scoring?
We joke that you really are just downloading your brain into the software in some level, where the scoring is not get a massive list and score up, score down, score up, score down. A more intelligent way to do that is there are basic rules that you can articulate in a prompt. For example, general to specific. If I am the striking leader in all of UFC history, that is going to be more important than anything I can say that takes a cut at the data. Flyweight, Brazilian, this year, all of those are subservient. So that's an easy to articulate rule. And if you articulate it once that way, you don't even have to articulate all the nuances. Now, you can, if you want, to say, actually, we think weight classes are more important than nationality, or we think, gender is more important than something else as a cut, right? Because it gives you a bigger group. And that's the kind of analysis we're doing.
How does the UFC measure the success of these AI-driven fan experiences?
UFC measures the success of UFC Insights engine by, it's a multifaceted thing, and it's also a gut thing, right? I don't have a KPI that says, how interesting was this insight? It's a weird KPI, right? You're like, all right, what's interesting, right? What does that mean? It's a continuous feedback loop for us. We understand what's interesting. Actually, when we launched UFC Insights engine, we were working with our social team, because one of the channels on which this goes out is we do an insight in social. And we were spitting out some of these insights, and social came back and they said, the platform we're putting this on, Instagram, Threads, all these things, they're like, the reaction we're getting is nerd. That's bad, right? I'm not speaking to the people on that platform if that's the reaction I'm getting. Okay, that doesn't mean all of it's bad. What are the things that these people find compelling, and how do we adjust the messaging to meet them where they are? Some of them we simplified, some of them we simply articulated differently. That's my KPI. Is it cool? Do people respond? And I have the same exact measure, imperfect though it is, with my commentators. Inevitably, we have to ask the people out on TV. But if my commentators aren't excited about talking about it, if it doesn't change the conversation they're having on television, even if they don't really recognize it, right? They'll read it, they'll say it aloud. And if they don't follow that thread, naturally, I have tweaking to do.
So how do you see AI shaping UFC or MMA or sports in general?
There are things AI is going to do for us at every phase of the company. Our employees, our partners, they are using AI-driven tech on a day-to-day basis, generally taking out, and this is the promise, right? Generally taking out some of the rote behavior and automating that, and then giving you more time to do some of the creative stuff. So we're doing all of that. The other side of the business, how does the creative side change? Obviously, generative AI allows you to do ideation. And now the question is, on the generative AI side, can you move from ideation to production? Because it's not just, you guys talk about governance a lot. There's a trust problem. All the way down to what we do. And what we do has already changed, as I said. We augment our stats collection practices with an AI computer vision augment. We are generating the storylines that my stats are supposed to put on screen with UFC Insights engine. And so we think that these things simply layer on top of what we currently do, and people onboard them in their regular work days, and it should help either make them more productive or make their output more compelling.
What is your advice for our listeners in the innovation and AI space to advance their businesses?
I think about AI on a regular basis. I will share with you the thing I've said a couple of times recently and gotten a chortle. So maybe we'll get a chortle. We'll find out. If someone had walked in to your office in 1999 from, the C-suite, and they said, all right, guys, I've heard of this internet thing. I need more internets in here. We've got to how are we interneting this problem? Right? That sounds ridiculous today. And AI is not different. AI is a tool, not a outcome. And we need to think about it that way. The change is coming. You should own the change. You should power the change. You should do all of those things. But AI is not an outcome. It's merely a structure, a framework, and you got to pull from it the things that make you better. That on the other end, you can say like, that changed how I work. That changed the output from my team. If you can't articulate that, 9 times out of 10, you probably shouldn't be doing it. I know that sounds like it's not an anti-AI stance. I use a ton of it, but you should be saying no to it as often as yes, if you're thinking about it from a outcomes perspective, from an impact perspective.
Alon, thank you so much for joining us here. And to everyone else, thanks for tuning in. We will see you again soon.